Welcome to the Cresco Wealthcast. My name is Dimitri Karolis. I'm the host of the pod, and I'm also an advisor within the Cresco Wealth Management team. Just want to say a quick thank you to all of you that continue to support and follow the channel. I appreciate you, and of course, welcome back. And if this is your first time to the podcast, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy. At the Cresco Wealthcast, the inspiration was very simple. I wanted to bring topics that were derived from real conversations, and I wanted to do it in a way that was relevant and relatable to you. And a lot of the conversations and the content that you're going to hear, it's coming from clients, it's family, it's friends, it's just being out and about and having those real conversations. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoy, but before I let you go, just want to let you know you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search at Cresco Wealth Management. Till then, enjoy the pod. Oh, and by the way, that music you're hearing, that's Pete Ems. He's one half of Small Town DJs, and it was nominated for a Juno Award. He's on the team, no big deal. Okay, well, I'm happy and excited to welcome back Chief Market Strategist for Wellington Altus, Dr. James Thorne. For some of you, it's a familiar household name. For those who don't know, you may have seen him before. So BNN, Bloomberg, Fox News, CBC, Globe and Mail, the publications we have in the Cresco Wealth Management on the team here. But periodically we bring Dr. Thorne in to speak in front of our clients, guests, prospective clients, and then I convince them to entertain me and do the podcast here for the Wealthcast. But yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining again. Appreciate it as always. We had a good talk earlier.
Dimitri, thanks for having me. Yeah. And are you having fun yet?
Oh yeah. Well, look, hey, you know what? We're having lots of fun because, sometimes, to pat on the back, I reiterate the thesis, right? So those that have talked to us long enough, we say you take a long-term approach, it can mean something. You can plan and forecast for certain controllables or where things are go. Everyone can talk about it, but periodically when we look back, because a lot of times where I want to take the Wealthcast, Dr. Thorne, is what's happening, what are clients talking about, what are they saying, and yes, it's Trump, yes, it's tariffs, yes, it's all things. And we're trying to talk around that. But I think that people, and my messaging has been people are missing things that they should be looking at that are actually impactful. You can say, are tariffs an impact if you use that by definition? Sure. But what impact is it? What's going on? So, like I said, we had a really good talk. I think you blew the socks off like you usually do with a lot of people in there. But I'll let you take the runway. What should we be looking at? What's on the table right now?
I don't think Trump wants a trade war. When you look at Trump's agenda, the cornerstone to Trump's agenda that he needs to achieve is world peace, not a global trade war. And so if you think of it that way, you get, what does that mean? That means peace in Ukraine, that means peace in the Middle East, that means a grand bargain with China. That means renegotiation with us, our free trade agreement. Let's be honest. The system that was developed in 1945, right, the post-World War II system, the global trading system that was based on this misinformed belief that there's going to be no trading barriers and that what's called the Ricardo, comparative advantage. If one country can manufacture something cheaper than another country, then that other country will manufacture something else. There'll be free trade and everybody will be better off. Well, let's be honest. Europe's got tariffs. China's got tariffs. And we've got to the point where the United States can no longer finance the global economy the way it's been going since 1945. When interest on government debt is greater than military spend, and this is what Mr. Scott Bassett says, who's the Secretary of the Treasury, in his testimony. This is what I would say: is just turn off the turn off CBC, and turn on C-SPAN, and listen to what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. He basically said, when you get to that point, empires die. Whether it's the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire.
Take it easy.
No, I know. But so what's the point? Is the Americans can no longer increase the level of debt. You know, so they have to go to a period, we have to go through this period of time of structural adjustment. And, you know, that's where we are. Up here in Canada, you know, they've cloaked it in this sovereignty thing, which is so naive. And, you know, what do I say? And I continually say, like, when I was a grad student, I worked for Imperial Oil. I got a great summer internship or a scholarship to work 3 years in Imperial Oil in the finance department. Dimitri, Imperial Oil is owned by ExxonMobil. Okay, so and I'm sitting here in Calgary. Okay, hey, Dimitri, Trump yesterday said he wants to build the Keystone Pipeline up here. Hey, Dimitri, this is about the economy that has the cheapest energy wins the AI race. We in Canada don't want to deal with that, but guess what? China is, the United States is, there is a global war to control AI, and we're sitting around here thinking, we shouldn't be a major participant in this? We've got energy. We've got a cold environment. They should be building hyperscalers up here like you wouldn't believe. And what are we doing? A high-speed train? Like, we as Canadians have to recognize the fact that it's no longer business as usual. They have to change. As I lived in D.C., what do they say in D.C.? I lived there for almost 15 years. Take President Trump seriously, not literally. And what do we up here continually do?
Yeah, we take him literally, unfortunately. And that's a great point, because going with the commentary around being the 51st state, and not to say anything bad, but Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, we already are in his eyes. Am I right to pose it that way?
This goes back to, I'm old enough to remember working in a summer job in these little factories in Toronto that existed because you would ship stuff up from the United States and then you would put them together in Toronto to get around the tariffs, right? So we're going back to are we really going to go back to Brian Mulroney and Ronald Reagan negotiating a free trade agreement? Are we really going to go back to there? Or are we going to go, and what we're talking about is going to have an integrated economy where the United States and Canada are more closely aligned economically speaking? And what does that mean? It means it's not about energy. First off, they need it, but I think Trump's going after, you know, the carve-outs. And Carney talked about this in the French debate. What are the 4 or 5 carve-outs, or those industries that are not included in the free trade agreement that we already have with the United States? One is what's called supply management or farming, right? Quebec farming, right? He says that's sacrosanct. Okay. He said nothing about banks, insurance, telecommunications, and airlines. And let me be clear, Mark Carney was the head of Brookfield. Where is Brookfield's headquarters? When he was under his watch, he moved the headquarters of Brookfield to New York City. To your point, it's there. If people would just stop and open up their eyes.
Well, it's interesting you talk about it'll bring me to my next question, but one point I bring up about telecommunications and the cell phone companies. And what I laugh is that if you ask any average Canadian if they could have some open source, or at least the ability to be able to have a cell phone provider that is not gouging you because you only get to pick between 1 or 2, the consensus I would assume would be like, yeah, let's have at it. Absolutely.
Or how about, let me give personal, like, I have 2 daughters in the arts, and they're dual, right? Yeah. Okay, fine, doesn't matter. But they sit there and go, they really like living up here in Canada because they've lived in the United States, you know, the majority of their life. Okay. They love it in Canada. They love what being Canada's all about. But yet they have friends or professional acquaintances that want to get their green card and go to the United States because they think that LA and New York is the place to be. Well, it is. So, wait a minute. Wouldn't you like it if we were like Europe, where you sit there and go, hey, Dimitri, do you want to go try, as an actor, do you want to go try and you know, start auditioning in New York or go to LA without a green card? And we've got it? Would that care? Would you care? Right? But people don't think like that.
No.
People are so emotional. They don't pull back and sit there and go, hey, comedy community, or hey, theater community in Alberta, if you're really good, you can go to New York and try, and you don't have to have a green card. Would that interest you or not? And I'm not saying, when I look at it, because my dad was American, I worked in the States, I got my professional career since coming back to Canada was in the States. There are things I really like about the United States. There are things I love about Canada.
Absolutely.
That I wouldn't want changed. Do you understand?
I agree with you, and I want to make it clear too, is not those that are listening are saying, oh, are we complete advocates and wanting to join and be a 50 free? It's not about that. It's about unraveling the actual status of what's going on.
Yes.
The play on accessibility and what's actually happening. And when the takeaway today, I love what you say. Don't take them literally, but just take them seriously. And one thing about that, when you say protective industries, is the conversation or questions we get about tariffs. People say, what's going to happen with tariffs? What do they mean? What's a misconception about this whole tariff game? About whether it's the actual impact or what it really means to the Canadian?
Well, I take the fentanyl crisis seriously. I don't buy into the CBC narrative that there is no fentanyl coming out of Canada. I think you have to look at what's happening in Vancouver, and I think also just step back and look at what really happened with TD Bank in terms of money laundering. That was fentanyl money. And here's the point. The regulator that slapped down TD was not Canadian. It was American.
That's right. That's a good point.
And
You're
so,
right.
the way I look at it is that needs to get done. And I think that is when you look at it as an economist, about the participation rate of males, it's dropping. And in the United States, J.D. Vance writes about this in his book, Hillbilly Elegy. It's not about jobs. It's about people can't hold a job because they're hooked on fentanyl. So hear me, I don't know so much about Alberta, but if you go to Northern Ontario, or you go to these towns that used to be industrial hubs, you can see it. Do you know what I mean? So so we need to deal. That is a social problem that we need to deal with. And so I look at that, and I also look at the fact that look, there are areas in this economy that I think that were protected by regulation that will no longer be protected. We went through, I think, banking, insurance. But then if you stand back and then you sit there and you parse what some of, like, for example, what some of the politicians are saying, let's be honest, right? I mean, with Daniel Smith, right? Okay, so if you X out oil, right? And I'm going to qualify that. Trump wants to build the Keystone, but everybody thinks, so they want more of our oil. Then what happens? The Americans we purchase more from the Americans than they do from us. I think the Americans know that.
I'm sure at least one person.
Okay,
yeah,
so then you go this. So then you go aluminum, right? What is the building block? Which is what Canadians, I think, they just don't get, or at least the Liberal Party, is cheap energy is the number one building block for economic competition. You want jobs in this country? Have cheap energy and create an environment that is open to capital coming in, not pushing it out. But let's use aluminum. First off, they don't have the smelters in the United States, pardon me, to basically process primary aluminum. And secondly, they don't have the excess of hydroelectric power to basically do that. That's why Quebec has a comparative advantage. Mm-hmm. So what's Trump going after? I honestly think it's about security. I think the premier, this is where I have no life, right? I watch, this on C-SPAN, you can get the Quebec, question period, right?
Yeah.
And the premier of Quebec was talking about, look, he goes through this, everything I said, and so he was asked, and I'm paraphrasing, okay? But he basically said, look, it's about security. They don't trust us anymore. That's what he said, not me. I think the man who has spent time in Washington talking to the power brokers, when he explains that in Quebec City in Parliament, that's what it is. They don't trust us anymore. They don't trust us anymore. And I think that's the big thing, what we don't understand, right? And the other thing I would say to you is, I think being out of Canada for a long period of time and then coming back in and working in the world of international finance, I think we have our view of ourselves is not the same as how other people view us. And I'll try to say that in the most diplomatic, respectful way.
Very Canadian way. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Okay, I like that. Thank you very much. And again, a lot of these, whether they're misconceptions or at least just giving clients and listeners an opportunity to, as we would say, clear the smoke. Let's take a look at what we should be looking at, what's actually out there. Let's talk about just the economy, the markets in general, forward looking. What should we be looking at the next 2 years, 3, 10, the landscape today?
Okay. So let's first off, and we always talk about this, that the economy is not the stock market or risk assets.
I gave you the softball on that.
That's
100%.
perfect. Okay, so we start there. Not two. Tiff Macklin said it out loud, and we've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years, or since I've known you. Canada needs to go through major structural adjustments. They've got to wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump has been the forcing function to make us look at the mirror, look at ourselves in the mirror. Everything that we've been talking about, whether it was last night with the Carney, with his closing statements in the debate, or Tiff Macklin 48 hours ago in his comments in Mississauga, where he basically said Canada is going to have painful structural changes they need to go through. We have been talking about this for 4 to 5 years since I've been back in Canada. So the question is, and so we are global asset allocators. That's how when I talk to you. Yes, I'm Canadian, but I'm a global asset allocator. My job is to tell you in Cresco and Wellington where is the best place to allocate global capital. And the real question comes back to is, what happens? Does Canada take the fork in the road or not? People say, will they? I don't know. It's a democracy. Okay? But if we go one way and Mr. Carney gets in or the Liberals get in, look, I'll just be objective. Or I'll say, how the Liberals governed these last 5 years was not how their platform was when Trudeau called an early election. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
And we've got Poilievre, which I think, and the Conservatives are making a major mistake by not pivoting and actually talking about what they're going to do and stop. They haven't learned, as some of the Liberals have attacked Mr. Trump. I think they need to take a page out of the book of what happened to Vice President Harris. People want policies. People are hurting. So we can sit there and complain about the Liberals talking about Trump. Poilievre's got to get off the carbon tax. Carney, the Liberals made the mistake. What are your policies now? Because he's not going to get into power using the carbon tax, Carney. So this is now a horse race. This is a losable election. The Conservatives need to learn about what happened. And what do the medium voters want? The medium voter, because economic growth has been generated by the government. That's Tiff Macklin says that, and Mark Carney says that. I've been saying that for 4 years. I've been writing about the economic mirage up here, okay? The medium voter is hurting. So we're in a fork in the road. And we need to, as global allocators, because the majority of what we've done is get our capital out of out of Canada into the United States, is what does this look like after the election, and does Canada become a place for global capital? Because that's who we are. We're no different than the Germans or the Americans or the Japanese, or the Middle East. We're all looking. The world is looking at us. They cannot believe that we are not one of the richest countries in the world with our natural resources. We should be hammering it in terms of economic wealth creation, because what is the driving force behind AI, cheap electricity, cold environment. So are Canadians going to wake up and smell the coffee, or are we going to continue down this path? And here's the irony of all this. China has pivoted. China is embracing the private sector. Are we going to? Everybody's moving but us. Right? Scott Bessent in his testimony said, he was asked about green. And I'm just like, this is just me, this is me communicating or being a reporter. He looked at the senator and said, respectfully, Senator, China is building 100 coal-fired plants. China is building 10 nuclear power stations, right? It is not about the race for green energy. The race is for cheap energy. Do we understand that the game has changed? Question mark. For global asset allocators, I think the pivot of Trump to the cornerstone of his administration is a peace dividend. So the Ukraine war...
Yeah, maybe take us through that when you say peace dividend. We're referring to what is in front of us, Ukraine, Middle East, global conflict. Or is it much more by definition or your assessment?
I would suggest to you that the global powers, the global economies, I'll be very general, I've reached a point, whether it's the United States, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, okay, let's just use them. They need a period of detente. They need a period of standing down so they can heal their balance sheets. The Americans can no longer absorb the excess capacity of the global economy. Okay, that's a fact. Okay, the Ricardian economic model of the post-World War II environment does not work when you've got major economies practicing mercantilist trade strategies or tariffs. They all need to generate growth, and they all need to pay down the excessive levels of debt. Debt now is as high as it's been. The only time it's been higher is during the Napoleonic Wars. So everybody's got to come together, and we've got to cut deals so that we can all our economies heal. I mean, I'm being very facetious and very so there's going to be a deal with Ukraine. There's going to be a deal. Mr. Trump, I think, is still going to Riyadh and meeting with Mohammed bin Salman.
Oh, with Salman,
Prince,
okay.
with Prince and Putin.
So you're saying a meeting with...
well, I think there's going to be a deal there to get oil down.
Yeah.
Right? They need oil down. Right? But that's a big tax cut. And then you've got President Xi, and he, like I was saying this morning, he's a princeling. Right? When they opened up China, they basically identified families to open it up. His family was picked. His sister and brother-in-law are billionaires. Okay? What do they control? What are they? Real estate, rare earth minerals. I mean, it's there. But China has massive debt. Their interest rates are falling. They're in debt deflation spiral. Mm-hmm. And they need to change. What is he doing? He's embracing Jack Ma. He's embracing the private sector. Well, are we going to do the same in Canada? I don't know. The rest of the world is. Hello, McFly. Right? And yet you turn on the CBC and it's like business as usual.
Am I able to title this podcast today Back to the Future?
Back to the Future.
That would be...
Well, but you and I have been talking about this.
For years.
For years. If you go Back to the Future and you shot it today, we'd be going back to 93. Dude, I was finishing my PhD in 93. We've lived this. So what do we need? So what's happening? What is Trump doing with Bessent and J.D. Vance? They're implementing, but they're doing it with Musk. They're doing it better, and they're actually doing it exactly what Clinton and Gore did in the 1990s. And what Clinton and Gore did was they basically were a continuation of the Reagan era. Okay? It was the Reagan policies that went from the 80s to 2000, and we had a secular bull market. We write about this pivot of going from Keynesianism to what we call Milton Friedman or from liberalism to libertarianism. It's the same shift as the 1980s.
So is it fair to say then, from a market perspective, we take that run, let's just say 10 plus, however years we want to call it, is it all around AI, and is that the structural transformation? Is that what this is all culminating to?
AI and blockchain, those will be the forcing functions.
Yeah.
And what will happen is we're building out the servers, we're building out, what we're doing is there's a period of time where you need to teach the computer. And so you're learning. So you need all these servers to take all the data, to learn, to attempt to have consciousness. And then we go through this period of inference where we take what the computers take what is learned and actually change the world. Like, why do I talk to you about Tesla? It's because Tesla's got all this data. Musk is basically learning from it, right? We're using NVIDIA chips, right, in their solutions. And then what he's going to do is he's going to transfer that into autonomous driving and robots and robo-taxis, right? So why is Tesla so interesting is because we have yet to actually take AI and change the economy.
It's going to happen.
Do you know what I
way
mean?
too
It's like we
fast.
haven't.
Yeah.
And so people say
Wow.
it's a game over. I sit there and go, name a true AI company, right? And so you get like in Calgary, like, so why Palantir? What was the first use case that Palantir? It's an AI platform that helps you become more efficient. I think it was Shell, but it might have been BP. I can't remember. I'm getting tired, right? They used Palantir. They used AI to increase the efficiency of their oil fields in Saudi Arabia. One of the things that I talk about is, do you know what the tech companies are? ExxonMobil is one of the top tech companies. These technology companies, this is not, and I'm sitting here talking about this in Calgary, right? So Palantir was used to increase the efficiency of the oil field, right? That's where we're going. We have yet to scratch the surface. So every company is going to have to embrace it, or they're going to be disintermediated. And the way I look at it is go back to, this is with blockchain and AI, go back to the 1990s, Back to the Future.
Okay.
The first iteration of the internet really was manifested in Amazon. Amazon wiped out the department stores. Those companies that don't understand this are going to be wiped out. Creative destruction, the invisible hand, right? That's going back to Milton Friedman, right? You know, and so we're no longer going to have the government choosing winners and losers. It's going to be the private sector. And the good thing about this, because I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, is that we are in this transition period, or this growth scare that we have been talking about forever, that's now becoming consensus. We're moving from an economy that's hooked on government spending. Carney talked about it last night, and 48 hours ago, Macklin did. So folks, I'm not making this up. And we've been talking about it for 4 years. What are the periods of time in history that it looks like this? Well, it's after World War I. And why do we want to use World War I? Well, interesting. We had the Spanish flu. We had a pandemic. More people died of the flu than they did in World War I, right? Interesting family note, right? My father's mother married twice because her husband went and fought in World War I, came back to Stratford, Ontario, and died of the flu. So my grandmother married twice, right? And when they went through the pandemic, and then you pivoted the economy away from an economy hooked on government spending, wartime, to private sector, you had a transition period. They didn't deal with it very well. You had a depression, and then you had the Roaring 20s. Yeah. Same thing happened in 45. You had an economy hooked on government spending, and that transition period to getting the private sector back, you had a recession, and folks thought that they were going back to the Depression era of the 30s. That was still the forefront of everybody's mind, was going back to the Depression. A decade of economic pain, right? After that happened, what did you get? You had the secular bull market that nobody, the forgotten secular bull market, where the S&P went up 7 times. So once we get through this transition period, we've got a secular growth run. I say to the end of the decade, could be longer. I mean, we're forecasting out, right? But how does this manifest in this period, this transition period? And so what we have been talking about is, and I feel sometimes, Dimitri, I'm a travel guy. I'm a tripper. We're going to go shoot the Petawawa River. We're going to go into Algonquin Park, which is a big park in Ontario. We're going to drive up, take one car, drive up to the radio observatory. We're going to drive the other car down, and then we're going to have 4 days of rapids. And it's a wonderful group of 7, did pictures on it, and it's great. But there are periods of time where there's big rapids. And then there's periods of time when there's little rapids and you don't have to paddle at all. Right? We're coming up to a period of time of rapids. We can portage. We can take, how big are the rapids? We don't know what the water flow is. We got to pull off to the side. We got to see if the rapids high, are the rapids low? Do we have to portage? Can we shoot it? That's what we're doing in terms of macro. And so this transition period we're coming up to, that Wall Street and Bay Street are finally waking up to, we've been positioned for. How long have we talked about this? I mean, we've been talking about this for at least a couple of years.
Easily, and it's very true, and it sounds to me, and I'll try to be as political as I can when I say this, is the places that you want to be, understand that deregulation and reliance on a private sector is really what will get you through there. And if you're handcuffed by the ability to not have the private sector after public has been exhausted, it's fair to say you might run into trouble.
Exactly. So, are we going to deregulate?
Canada.
Are we going to cut taxes? That's the code for. Are we going to make this economy attractive to capital, which is deregulation, tax cuts? I mean, everything that goes against what we've, and I'm just going to say Ottawa, because I don't want, if I mention the political party, people get, we're taxing capital gains. The carbon tax, right? China's not doing it. India's not doing it. The United States is walking away from it. Now, if we as a democracy say we want to do that, hey, that's what a democracy says. What do I do as a global allocator? I say, no capital in Canada, right? We are free as a democracy to do what we want to do. But there are consequences. And so my job is to basically, I'm a consultant for you, Dimitri. I come in and I go, here's what we got, man. Build your portfolios, giving your clients risk tolerance, their goals, their financial plans. You'll look at me and go, well, Jim, you're right 60 to 70%. And I am 60 to 70% of the time. If I'm right 60 to 70, I'm world class. Okay? And so then you take it away with the Cresco team, and you build the portfolios. We are all open-minded to the fact that we could be wrong, things could change. Like for example, who knew? How are you going to model the fact that President Xi is going to embrace the private sector and all of a sudden gun him to cut rates, and all of a sudden China starts going and running? Yeah, you can't model that. But what do we do as researchers? We say, we look at the probability of it, and now we sit there and go, well, it's very high. And then we sit there and go, the probability of a grand bargain between Mr. Trump and President Xi, or President Trump and President Xi, is very high. That changes our view. So do you want to have an allocation to China? Do you want to have Alibaba? Now, here's my point. My job is to sit there and say to you, you should consider it. Maybe you don't do it. Maybe you don't want to do it. Maybe you sit there and say, it's only a 5% rate, and if China goes up, we're going to get the same action over here in the NASDAQ 100. Our clients are going to achieve their financial goals. I hear you, Jim. Gives us a way to look at the world, but we've chosen not to manifest it in the portfolio. And that's okay.
True, and you know what? This is probably, I'll add this commentary, a good segue to wrap it up, and because we could go on forever, and we didn't even touch Bitcoin today or any crypto, which I know you like. We got to do another one because there is a lot of conversations to be had. So if we come back, we'd do a crypto digital podcast, which would be great. But to your point, going back and say that is the breath of fresh air. Why Wellington Altus? Why Cresco Wealth Management? Why we have you, Dr. Thorne, on the team, and a breath of fresh air to say we get to have an independent view. We get to look at things for what they are, actually interpret the data without someone breathing down our throat to say, we've created a fund that we feel is purposeful for your clients. We have how to put this nicely, an obligation to the market in a particular jurisdiction and incentivized to do so. So we don't have that here. So that's why, Dr. Thorne, I can't thank you enough for always speaking to our clients, our listeners, and everyone, and saying, the breath of fresh air with Wellington Altus. Independent view, independent advice, the ability to ascertain real decision making for our clients, for our prospective clients alike. And I know we got you a couple times today, so I don't want to talk you out today because we got 2 more today. So I got to keep you fresh. Otherwise, Peter's banging on the door, telling us to hurry up. But I can't thank you enough for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Cheers. Anytime.
What's the X handle? Before
Dr.
we go?
J Strategy.
Dr. J Strategy. There we go. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Hope you enjoyed the episode, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Please feel free to leave your comments, or even if you want to let me know topics that you think I should be talking about. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search at Cresco Wealth Management. And last but not least, if you want to be up to date with our newsletters, our insights, and even our events that we host throughout the year, you can reach out to me directly. It's pretty simple. You could just go to our website, find me from there, crescowealthmanagement.com. Thanks again, everyone.